Welcome to Story Chat Radio. We are book editors Carly Hayward and Jenny Chappell. Every month we watch a different movie with an eye for storytelling and novel writing.
We use our years of training and experience editing novels to break down each movie's storytelling elements to help you improve your novel in progress.
Warning, Jenny ruins everything.
Hey, you ruin things too.
So don't be surprised if there are spoilers. On this episode, we are discussing the superhero movie Birds of Prey, and then we'll end with the critique of one lucky author's query.
Here come the spoilers. This month's summary is kind of long because we have 5 main characters, but I'll keep it as brief as possible. After a bad breakup with Joker, Harley Quinn publicly announces their breakup by blowing up the Ace Chemicals plant. Gotham City detective Renee Montoya, our second protagonist, investigates a series of mob killings carried out by a crossbow-wielding vigilante. She finds Harley's necklace at the scene of the explosion and asks Dinah Lance, who's our third main character, and a nightclub singer turned new driver to mob boss Roman Sionis, to become a confidential informant. So she's basically just running the whole Gotham City Police Department.
Sounds like it.
Sionis sends Dinah to retrieve a diamond that's important to the Bertinelli crime family, who were massacred years ago. Then we meet young pickpocket Cassandra Cain, who's our fourth main character, when she steals the diamond and swallows it soon after she's arrested. So to get the diamond, Harley breaks into the police department with her cartoonish weapons and frees Cassandra, and the pair escape. They meet the crossbow killer, who is Helena Bertinelli, and our final main character. She has been targeting each of the gangsters responsible for her family's murders. Harley calls Sionis and offers to turn Cassandra over in exchange for his protection against all of the people that she's made angry over the course of the movie, agreeing to meet at an abandoned amusement park. Dinah notifies Montoya of the rendezvous, but her betrayal is noticed. Sionis dons the ritualistic mask that he always wears, which gives him the nickname Black Mask. Thus, we set up for the big climax at the amusement park. There, our main characters confront each other, but eventually realize they'll have to work together to fight their way out past Sionis. They each do all their cool comic book tricks, including Dinah revealing her metahuman ability of supersonic screaming in order to defeat Sionis' men. Eventually, Cassandra defeats Sionis with a grenade, and they all escape. In a sort of epilogue, Montoya quits the Gotham City Police Department. I guess she got tired of running it. And joins Dinah and Helena in establishing a team of vigilantes called the Birds of Prey. And Harley and Cassandra escape to start their own contract killing business. So, Carly, what did you think of the movie?
I actually really liked it, and I was kind of surprised because I'm a little burnt out on superhero movies in general. And I haven't really been enjoying the latest DC ones very much. I do love Batman, but not lately.
Right.
But the humor in this one was really spot on for me. I really liked how they kind of leaned into that comic book humor and ridiculousness. It definitely was like a full-on classic superhero movie, but it like upended it in a certain way and kind of leaned into the tropes in a funny, witty manner. I don't know. All in all, I really liked it, but I'm also kind of a sucker for a villain point of view.
Right.
I always like learning about the villain and what makes them human and all that stuff. I mean, I don't think the movie was like amazing by any means, but I did really enjoy it. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this movie was pretty much exactly what I expected it to be. I didn't think there were, like, a lot of huge surprises. Like, it's an action movie. I do think the plot was a lot more intricate than a lot of action or comic book movies sometimes are, just in terms of having the viewer invested in so many characters and storylines, and they did a really nice job tying them all together. So, like, I feel like the Marvel movies do a good job with that, but it's because they have sort of that continuing arc. So all of those don't necessarily tie together in that one movie. So two of these characters, Harley Quinn and Renee Montoya, were actually introduced in the 90s Batman the Animated Series, which I watched as a kid and loved, like before you were even born.
I was not born in the 90s. But we all know you're old, so it's
right,
fine.
Exactly. So I was really pleased to see how they translated Montoya to this like tough as nails detective for adults. And Rosie Perez, I thought, did an amazing job bringing her character to life. She was definitely
amazing.
like the female character that we want to see more of and know more about. She was definitely that character in this movie for me, even though she was in it a lot, because the movie really focuses primarily on Harley, and then everybody else sort of like revolves around her because she was so popular from the Suicide Squad movie.
Right.
So I really liked Montoya in it. I'd totally be okay with having a whole movie just about her. And I was really, really glad to see that they included her sexuality and they worked it in such an organic way. Because there's already not great LGBT representation in comics. So if they had not had one of those characters in the movie also be LGBT, like that would have really sucked.
Agreed.
And then honestly, like, I just love Jurnee Smollett so much. Like, to me, she's one of those actors that just, like, disappears into her role so much that, like, I don't even recognize her right away.
Yeah, Dinah was the one I wanted more of.
Yeah.
I could watch a whole movie about her. She's amazing.
She really was. And so then the other aspect that I really liked is kind of what you were saying, that they didn't shy away from like all of those bright colors and exaggerated imagery, because that's so Harley and Joker. And of course the movie is very girl power and has a message of like women supporting women, even when you're also fighting, which I love.
Gotta love that girl power.
So overall, what did you feel like the movie did well that writers can use in their own work?
So I think this movie like exemplifies the quintessential anti-hero. Like, they are all anti-heroes. This is what your movie is. And I think everyone loves a good anti-hero.
Yeah.
But let's take a minute and define what that actually is. So an anti-hero is a main character, your story's hero, that doesn't fit the typical mold. Usually they are like morally bankrupt or live in shades of gray. An anti-hero usually acts out of self-interest and not idealism or for the greater good. Sometimes an anti-hero will do something good, but it's always for quote-unquote the wrong reasons or for very selfish, internally focused reasons. But that's kind of why we love anti-heroes, because most people honestly do act in their own self-interest, and there's nothing wrong with that. Being selfish is not a bad thing, and we want to see that reflected in our characters. And anti-heroes kind of show us that darker side and make us feel better that we can be selfish and still kind of do the right thing and still be helpful and loved by other people. So in literature and pop culture, it's just like riddled with anti-heroes. They're everywhere. The first one that kind of springs to mind for me, though, is Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind. She's basically as vain as they come. She is only concerned with making herself happy and enjoying her life. And we spend the whole book following her around as the world literally crumbles, and she continues to just focus on herself and how it affects her and what she deserves. But in the end, she kind of learns and grows and does some minimal good. And we kind of like can relate to that of the world sucks, but doesn't the world suck for me too? So that's kind of a nice way to like get your readers engaged. Then we have like Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe, who are those hard-edged private detectives or private eyes that are just in it for the money, but they do good because they stop the crime and stuff like that.
Right.
We've got Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby, who basically just amasses a great fortune and throws elaborate parties, all with the intent to win Daisy's affection. He does really awful things and makes all of his money through illegal, shady business deals. And he never claims to be a good man. He's just doing this to get the thing he wants. But by the end, we kind of see him try to sacrifice himself to save Daisy. But until that point, we spend the whole book watching Jay live extravagantly and offer absolutely nothing to the world. Mm-hmm. But he's kind of compelling because of that. He's fascinating because he's utterly consumed by his desires and doesn't care about morals or what is good. He is just in it to follow his desire and his passion. So antiheroes really allow readers to indulge that side of themselves that isn't concerned with doing the right thing or being altruistic. They're just very kind of real and relatable in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have a little bit of a different take on antiheroes.
Interesting.
I feel like I've always been drawn to them, like even as a kid. So like, because Harley Quinn originated on that 90s Batman cartoon, like this movie pulls me like into my childhood a little bit, even though it's very much not a movie for children. So like, if you haven't seen it, do not watch it with young children.
Yes, no.
So at the same time, I was watching like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the X-Men cartoon, and like Wolverine is very much of an anti-hero. Raphael was my favorite Ninja Turtle, and I always thought of him as being like a little bit of like an anti-hero. And I think part of that is like their sarcasm. So you may not know this about me, Carly, but I have a very sarcastic side.
What?
I know. Imagine that.
Never saw that.
I think in general, like I totally agree in general, like readers and viewers really like anti-heroes. I think it's because they're inherently complex characters. Like,
that's true.
Yeah, Superman is a great guy, and like, in fact, to your point about other DC movies, I really don't like what they've done with Superman, kind of trying to turn him into an anti-hero now. Mm-hmm. But I won't get into that. That's for another podcast. But characters like Superman can be very one note. Like purely good characters can feel very predictable and too perfect. And yes, like you said, unrealistic. Overall, I think we as readers or viewers connect with characters' flaws as much as or even more than we connect with their strengths. So, of course, we want to be able to root for our main character, but just as importantly, we want to be able to see something of ourselves in them, and no one is as perfect as Superman. Not even just like physically, but his like, very hardcore right and wrong morality.
I know. It's annoying.
Yeah, so I think there's something to be said for seeing a deeply flawed character struggle with morality and ultimately make the decision to do good rather than always knowing what the right thing is. So when we see these kinds of characters doing that, see, to me, this is the only part we actually differ maybe in opinion on, or maybe we're just restating the same thing in two different ways.
Let's see.
So I feel like when we see characters doing that it gives us hope that can happen in real life too, for us and for other people. Like for me, I see it almost as like an optimism and faith in humanity, that like anti-heroes can be bad people and still do good. So yeah. We can be bad people and still do good.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of said that in that like, they make us feel better that we don't need to be perfect in order to do good things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we basically agree. It's just a little bit different.
It's a little bit different.
I think part of the difference is, like, don't take away my editor card when I tell you this, but I am not a fan of The Great Gatsby. Like, dun, dun, at all. Dun. No, it's okay. If I tried to read it now, I would not finish. The only reason I read it when I did was because I had to. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's a classic example of how I could not relate to the character at all. And even having gone back and tried to read it again as an adult, still just could not relate to the main character at all.
So what I'm getting from this is you think you're too good of a person to relate to how shitty of a person
I think
Gatsby is.
maybe if he was poor.
That would make
I
him
think maybe it's
relatable.
the wealth I can't relate to.
Yeah, I get that.
And like that extravagance and stuff. I'm just like, if I had that money, like there's no way I'd be wasting it on that crap.
That's fair. That's very fair. But you're quintessentially a good person, unlike me, who
Whatever.
likes to, you know. I like the darker side of the things because it makes me feel better about my dark side, whereas those dark sides make you feel hopeful about people.
This is starting to turn into like a therapy session now.
I know.
Like about
I was thinking
fundamental
that.
differences.
I was thinking about that when we decided on this topic. I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. But no, I totally agree with everything you're saying. But so anyway, like we said, this movie is all about anti-heroes. I really can't think of a single pure hero in the whole bunch. Like there's Superman's definitely not here doing good. So let's start with our biggest main character, which is Harley Quinn, which, as you said, they focus on her. She's a villain. She's a villain that has wreaked havoc throughout Gotham. But it's her origin story that's kind of really compelling. It's the fact that she was a psychologist that fell in love with the Joker and then sacrificed basically her sanity for him. It makes her more human. It makes her more relatable. She isn't that distant villain that hurts people for the fun of it. She did it for love. And now she's being reckless and harmful because she's hurt and she's afraid. She no longer has that protection. She's out there on her own. The entire city, like you said, has turned against her, and she must do those bad things to stay alive. And that's the only way she knows how to stay alive. So even as she begins to try to be good, she decides she likes Cassandra and maybe won't turn her in. But it's at that pivotal moment that she's betrayed by the one person in the whole city that she trusts. So when that happens, she immediately falls back on her selfish tendencies and decides to hand over Cassandra to Sionis. So by the end, we see that Harley feels bad and rescues Cassandra. She even apologizes a couple times, I think. And we see that growth and learning, but also we're able to relate to making those bad decisions and hurting the people in our lives. It's just a very relatable arc that serves those like things we're ashamed of while also giving us hope, as you would say. Then we've got Renee Montoya, who's the quintessential hard-boiled detective. She's basically Sam Spade.
Yep.
She's sick of all the red tape and having her wins be co-opted by the men in the precinct, which totally would piss me off too. So again, relatable. So she basically goes rogue. She stops following procedure. She steals evidence. She kind of just does whatever the hell she wants, so that she can like get done what she wants to get done. She basically becomes a vigilante that's focused on doing things her way and not worried about rules or safety or protocol or any of those kind of structured societal things. Then we have Dinah Lance, who's just trying to live her life. Her mother was kind of a hero and was torn apart by the system. So she sees that, and instead of wanting to help people, she doesn't care. She just wants to survive. She wants to put herself first. And good, she should. That's very important. And she's working for Sionis, even though she abhors a lot of what he does. But she needs to make a living. She needs safety. Like, this is how she knows how to get it done. It's only as she observes the depth of his depravity that she kind of comes around to doing something else and helping Cassandra. And then we have Helena Bertinelli, who's focused on vengeance, and that is literally all she cares about. Her purpose is to avenge her family's murder. That's all. She couldn't care less about anything else that's going on in Gotham. She wants to get in, kill the people she came to kill, and get out. But she helps out because by the end of the movie, her vendetta's over, and what else is she going to do?
Right.
She's kind of like, all right, well, I guess I'm here. Let's do this. Like, she has no altruistic motivation.
She's going to become the Dread Pirate Roberts now.
Yes, exactly. She's like, all right, let's do it. And then finally we've got Cassandra, who just wants to survive and steal and be good at stealing. She wants money and independence. She's not in it to, like, do any good. She's not in it to stop Sionis from ruling Gotham. She just kind of wants to survive and live. They're all just working towards their selfish goals. And while they might help others along the way or help each other or have their redeeming qualities, no one's in it to stop Sionis because he's a bad guy.
Right.
They're in it to survive. And when they all get cornered and team up, it's only because it's their only chance to escape. They care about each other by the end, and they all have differing feelings for Cassandra, but in that moment, they just want to live. They don't really care about saving each other. They care about getting out.
Right.
So all these characters move the plot forward through their selfishness, basically. And yeah, I think they just want to survive, and those relationships get formed along the way kind of accidentally. And they accidentally do the right things by stopping Sionis, even though they're doing it for themselves. And kind of nothing's more relatable than that. Like, doing good because you're doing good for yourself. Yeah, no.
I'm just thinking about it from the psychology standpoint again.
Okay,
Really
I'm ready for you to analyze
just
me.
analyzing you. We'll have a deeper conversation about this.
I mean, being selfish and, like, self-care has had its little resurgence, and I think people associate selfishness with a bad thing, when in reality it's just, like, making sure you focus on yourself and get done what you need to get done for yourself.
So what you're telling me is Harley Quinn was just indulging in some self-care.
Yes, that's what I got from it. Did you not get that? No, she's trying to survive and, like, some self-care. She can't help anyone if she's dead, so you got to put yourself first.
It's really she's just getting over
There's heartbreak.
A long-term relationship. I mean, they had been together since the 90s.
Do you not bring a giant beanbag gun full of paintball powder when
basically
you're
looks
getting
like fireworks?
Yeah, I feel like that's what everyone does after a breakup.
Yeah, well, since I've been with the same person for like 22 years.
I assume
I
that's
barely
what it
even
is.
remember what I do when I break.
I just mean she needs to survive first, so she has to put herself first.
Yes.
Otherwise, she can't help anybody.
So, we've talked about a lot of different examples of anti-heroes, but I feel like most of them fall into a couple of categories. Now, pay attention, because we're going to have a pop quiz at the end of this little segment. Are you ready?
I was not... Since when do you quiz me? We have to have a pop quiz?
It's a new thing.
Okay.
It's a new thing.
Okay, I hope I ace it. Like, that'd be embarrassing.
It would be. Especially because you should know this stuff. So, the first one I think is like a rebel who's like a hero, almost a hero, but not quite. So, like, maybe they do the right thing, but they don't, like, want it to ruin their reputation kind of thing. These are sort of like the lone wolf types who are mostly moral, but aren't afraid to, like, break the rules when they have to in order to get the outcome that they want. So, like you said, Carly, they see the world in shades of gray, not, like, purely good or bad. So then we've got a second kind of anti-hero that is really more like a villain than a hero. They are the characters who are self-serving and will do good if it happens to align with what they want and fits into their own code, which may or may not be based on morals that, like, other people would understand.
Yep.
And then there's another kind of anti-hero that's actually It's actually kind of evil, but uses their, like, evil powers to do good. So I'm thinking of, like, Dexter in the TV series and book series. So, like, a person who does truly bad things, but justifies it because it benefits society somehow. So all of them do share some characteristics, though. They need to have sound motivations that make sense to them. So, like, they have kind of their own set of rules that they go by, and are intricately related to their own emotional wounds. So an anti-hero can be pretty evil, but they can't be as bad as, like, the actual antagonist.
Right.
Your reader will always need to be able to feel like they haven't gone so far that they become unredeemable. So I think Dinah and the, like, main sort of right-hand man of Sionis, his name was Zaz, are a great example of this. He will do whatever Sionis tells him to do because he doesn't really have his own moral code, or at least it doesn't conflict with any of these orders. This isn't his story. But Dinah can't let them do these terrible things without letting Montoya know. So that's like one way that you can use other characters to highlight the vulnerabilities of the anti-heroic character. So another example of that we see in the movie is, like you were saying, that Harley develops this soft spot for Cassandra. So we kind of get to see that, like, she does have some kind of moral code. And then lastly, remember that anti-heroes aren't, like, role models. If their arc takes them that way, they really become heroes, which is fine. But I think that the best anti-heroes don't fundamentally change in the long run. They're always selfish or just broken and never really become, like, nice. Even though they use their powers for some good and not pure evil. I do want to point out here that not all anti-heroes are unlikable. Sometimes they can be very charming, even though they do terrible things. And I think that's part of their complexity and part of our appreciation of them is how they can be super charming, but also do all of these really terrible things. So I hope you were paying attention.
I was not.
It's
was
quiz
I supposed
time.
To be listening to
it's
you?
Quiz time.
Oh, no.
So because we have these 5 characters that we have agreed are all anti-heroes, which character do you think is which kind of anti-hero? So your choices are, like, the rebel, the self-serving, and then, like, a sociopath with a heart of gold.
Okay. So the rebel is definitely Montoya.
Yeah.
Because she wants to do good. She just hates all the red tape structuring doing that good. I think you're going to disagree with me, but we'll see. I think the sociopath is actually Helena.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh, yay, we agree. Oh my goodness. I am acing this quiz.
She reminds me a lot of, like, the Punisher from Marvel. She is almost like Dexter. Like, she's got, like, her sense of justice, you know? So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. She's doing bad things. She's murdering people, but it is benefiting society. So that's great. And then I think, like, Harley and Cassandra are very self-serving. Dinah, I would probably put into the self-serving category as well. She's kind of just sticking to her own code. She might be a little bit more of the rebel.
Yeah.
That, like, her moral code is actually pretty strong, but she also doesn't really care about
I think she'll let things go to a certain point.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to see kind of this version of Dinah because she's a pretty big comic book character. And she's typically, like, a good guy. So, but yeah, I think this version of her, I would agree with you, is kind of, she's maybe, like, halfway between the rebel and the self-serving, you know?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
In a lot of ways, I think she's the most relatable and maybe the least of, like, an anti-hero. She's not really, like, a hero either, but I think she might be the most relatable in terms of being, like, just a normal person.
Yeah, she's pretty
just, like,
neutral.
trying to live her life, She's not trying to, like, save anybody, but she also doesn't, like, actively want to hurt anybody. You know, and she kind of gets pulled into this really bad. Yeah, see, we totally need a Dinah movie.
Exactly. I told you, Dinah is the one we need. She is so cool. So would you say I aced your quiz?
I don't know if I'd say aced.
No.
Passed.
Fine. You're so mean to me.
I'm one of those professors that never gives, like, an A+. No one can ever get 100 on anything from me. Not really. I'm such a pushover. I'm the one who's, like, drawing, like, a smiley face in the 100.
I feel like you gave me 110 because you liked my penmanship or something.
Yeah, you get a gold star.
Yeah. I agree. I like these categories, though. I think they're very solid. So, both Antiheroes and Heroes move your story forward and bring about your resolution. So don't forget, they're still, like, your main character. But I think they do have some fundamental differences. And I think that comes out in how they go about things. Their motivations are entirely different, and their goals are very different. So, between heroes and anti-heroes, what they want and why they end up doing good are completely, totally different. So, anti-heroes have goals that are kind of self-serving, like I said, and separate them, and those goals are separate from the greater good. Sure, they might want to help someone, but usually it's helping people they know or about a specific cause that they care about for some specific reason.
Or, like, I think, like, in Montoya's case, she does want to help, but she sees that, like, the quote-unquote right way of doing things that she's been trying to do for years is getting her nowhere. So she has to, like, do things the quote-unquote wrong way in order to be able to actually achieve her goal of helping people.
Yeah, I think she's actually probably the most good.
Yeah, I think so too.
So the anti-heroes might help people, but usually they're only doing it kind of for, like, the glory or in order to help themselves too. So, like, Harley Quinn is really focused on surviving, and if along the way she helps Cassandra, then great. And their motivations are always kind of related to some sort of hurt or emotional wound, like you were saying, that has made them really cynical. So usually heroes take that same hurt and they turn it into something that makes them a good person, and they turn it into something positive.
Right.
Whereas your anti-heroes become really cynical or downbeaten or just focused on surviving themselves. They're kind of like lone wolves, or like you were saying with Montoya, she's just really cynical about the system, so she needs to go rogue and do it herself because she's been so hurt by everything. So like I said, heroes will take that hurt and turn it into something positive that pushes them to help others or do what is kind of objectively right. Anti-heroes take that hurt and become cynical, losing faith in the world around them. Their moral code turns really gray, or at least, like, pulls far back from what is considered the typical moral code that we all kind of live by. And they take steps to further their own agenda more so than a hero would. Of course, good things can come out of that, but it's only within their own code and with their heart of gold that comes about. So they kind of do good despite themselves sometimes, and usually in the most selfish way possible. So Harley Quinn does have a bit of a heart of gold, and she does love Cassandra, so she does help Cassandra, and she does a very good thing with that. But it's only because Cassandra has tapped into that weakness and into that emotional wound that she ends up finally doing that good thing. So don't forget the anti-heroes are still sort of your hero, but with that kind of dark underlying current. They still may help people and resolve the conflict of the book, but on their own terms and with those dark motivations and goals kind of directing them into that way. So you want to make sure they're still pushing your plot, they're still solving conflict, they're still possibly doing good, but with that underlying dark current.
Right. Yeah, so a lot of anti-heroes will get redemption arcs over the course of a story or a series. And then some of them kind of go the other way and then stay or become villains. So, again, I just want to take a second here and kind of talk about what is a redemption arc. So that's when a character's development arc takes them from being a villain to being more of a hero. Their redemption is in the eyes of the readers and the other characters. We can see that here in that sort of epilogue piece. Mm-hmm. So Harley and Cassandra have essentially done their good deed this one time by getting rid of Sionis, even though, that wasn't their intention to help other people, because it really only benefited them.
Yep.
And it just happened to align with the side of what's good for society. But then Montoya and Dinah and Helena all get this redemption arc of creating this crime-fighting team. So we get the idea that they'll continue to work toward making Gotham a better place for its citizens rather than terrorizing them, although there's going to be a good deal of terror in that too. That's kind of the whole thing about being a vigilante, is that, you're hurting other people in the process in a way that the police aren't supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Just leave that there for a second.
Long silence.
So we can see that they are kind of what am I trying to say? Arc. Yeah, I'm really kind of getting hung up on what police are supposed to do.
Redemption arc.
Right. We can see what kind of anti-hero they are, played a role in their redemption arcs. That's not always what happens in a story. But it speaks to the element I mentioned earlier, that anti-heroes can't really completely be villains. So in the long run, for your reader, to continue to connect with an anti-hero, they have to stay just on the right side of worthiness of redemption. So there's been a lot of discussion about this recently in the book world and also TV show fandoms. Mm-hmm. So the line for what makes a character unredeemable can vary from reader to reader. I think a lot of this has to do with each reader bringing their own experiences and their own morals to their connection with the story. And that interactive experience is really what makes reading so amazing. Mm-hmm. So with the other elements we've discussed on previous episodes of the podcast, when you're considering whether an anti-hero is worthy of redemption, think about the impact this has on your reader. Make sure you're considering if your reader is going to be able to take that journey with you and the character, or if you're making too big of a leap from that sort of negative or hurtful behavior into, trying to see them as more of a hero type character. Of course, you can't always make everyone happy, but the last thing you want to do is leave your readers feeling unsatisfied. So as always, know your tropes, do your research, find out what stories in your genres readers feel got a lot wrong, or turn fans against them, and understand why as you're considering your own story.
Agreed. I think the biggest pitfall with anti-heroes is that point of them becoming unredeemable.
Yeah.
It's always a really fine line where your reader loves your anti-hero and then despises them. Mm-hmm. And I do think there are certain acts that will make someone unredeemable. And that line, like you said, can be different for every reader.
Yeah.
It's always a big balancing act. So, take anti-heroes like Dexter, as you mentioned earlier. He's a serial killer that is only redeemable because he does try to do good. His urges are dark, so he turns those urges on other dark people and only kills other serial killers. So usually a serial killer is completely unredeemable, but because he's trying and he's found a way to change it and do some good with it, he becomes redeemable. Then we got Harley Quinn in this story, and she just causes mayhem and chaos wherever she goes. She doesn't care about anyone and is only concerned with herself. And she veers into being nearly unredeemable because she doesn't care about anyone. But she becomes redeemable by finding someone to care about and to nurture. And she takes to Cassandra, and we see that she's just this wounded person that's not incapable of love, who's not just so fully sociopathic, far away from regular morals. She's capable of caring, and that makes her more redeemable. She doesn't go all the way over into villain territory. So let's see, who else do we got? I think those are the two I wanted to talk about. But basically, you need to balance your anti-heroes so that they have redeemable qualities. They have that heart of gold. They have that mission that you understand their motivations for, like with Helena. You get that she wants to kill these people because they killed her family. So it's sort of relatable, even if you wouldn't turn to murder yourself.
You can at least understand the motivation. You can understand the drive to want to do it.
Exactly. So the motivation makes her redeemable because it's relatable.
Right.
So take that hurt that they've twisted into something dark and really make that hurt relatable. Yeah. Make it excusable, and like let goodness begin to heal that hurt a little bit so that we can see that they could become better people, or at least not evil people. They can kind of be that neutral, sure, I'll help you out this one time, or I might hate everyone, but I like this one person. I love this one person, so that's my redeemable quality. Basically, just dance that line between villain and hero.
So this
is your research.
For me, this is, I want to talk for a second about enemies to lovers. Mm-hmm. Because this is, as much as I love the enemies to lovers trope, this is, for me, where it falls apart a lot, is that during the enemies period, that the one or the other will do something that, in my eyes, is irredeemable. Agreed. So they can't, I could never want them to be together because they cross that boundary for me. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to think about that in terms of how your character relates to the other characters. So like with Harley Quinn, part of what makes her feel redeemable at the end of this movie is that she was redeemable in regards to one of our other protagonists. You know, when it came down to it, she could have killed all of the rest of those protagonists, theoretically. Mm-hmm. But she didn't. You know, she worked with them to try to get out and even ended up saving Cassandra. So, you know, think about for your own characters how that those dark qualities relate to the other characters in your story. Mm-hmm. So especially with enemies to lovers. And I think whenever you're looking at having some kind of relationship where you start off as adversaries and then you move to being some kind of ally, you have to take into account like how, if you have characters who, let's say you have a hero and then an ally, a reluctant ally who's an anti-hero, they have to be able to trust each other. Mm-hmm. So like if you're looking at it long term, I see this a lot in series. So like urban fantasy series, mystery series, science fiction series that you might have like a reluctant anti-hero ally who has to prove themselves. So that's where it's about bringing the reader on the journey with you and showing how they can redeem themselves from where they started, even if they don't ever really end up being like nice people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about, it's about how they interact with the characters you want them to have that allyship with. So had Harley Quinn killed or hurt any of those main characters, she probably would have become unredeemable. She would have just not been someone that we rooted for. But the fact that she only harms the antagonist and she allies with these people that we like, she becomes redeemable and we like her. I think that's a great point.
Right. So that brings us to our query for this month, which, oddly enough, it's just perfect. We got an adult novel that has comic book themes and an anti-hero. Like, how lucky did we get?
I know, that's crazy.
So what were your thoughts on this query?
It really could not have been more perfect for this movie. Right. If the author hasn't watched this movie, they definitely should. Mm-hmm. And I actually thought this query was pretty great. I kind of very much want to read this book.
Yeah,
it had a hint of voice and humor. It had a clear MC. It had a clear conflict. I think my one note with it was the stakes could have been a little more amped up. Mm-hmm. So our main character is also on a vendetta to kill the murderers of her parents. And I needed a little bit more anger from her and a little bit more of that motivation to avenge her parents' death. Mm-hmm. The humor is wonderful, but like some more tension and angst when we discover that main conflict will highlight her motivations and kind of push it into a little bit more compelling.
Right.
What do you think?
I agree with everything you just said. I think it sounds like a great story. I also think it's really important. So in your paragraph where you are giving the specific information about your book, your word count and genre and age category, you need to make sure you're specific about those things. So in this case, the genre isn't specific enough. Mm-hmm. And you also need to make sure that your comp titles match the genre that you're going for. Now, it is okay to use some that are outside your genre, but part of the point of a comp title is to show that you have market awareness, so that you've read widely within the market, that you are writing and you understand the tropes for that, the standards for that genre and age category. So I think both of the comps that you use are good for theme, but the genre feels off because they're both thrillers instead of superhero stories. They really seem very standard, like, they don't have any like elements of science fiction or fantasy in them. So I think you should consider replacing one of your comps with one of the popular superhero stories out there as sort of like an this thriller meets this superhero story kind of thing. There is a hint of humor in this query that makes me think James Allen Gardner's Dark Spark series might be a good comp, or maybe look at V.E. Schwab's Villain series. That's also a superhero series.
The Villain series.
Right, right. But that one is darker. It is. So yeah, just, take a look at those and see if you can pull in a comp that shows that market awareness too.
Agreed. All right, so I think we've come to the end. On our next podcast, we will be discussing the horror film Get Out, which I am not looking forward to, Jenny. I don't know why you keep making me watch scary movies. It's really mean.
I wanted to watch a scarier movie, but this doesn't have to be good enough. Also,
I am excited.
Carly,
yes.
Next month is our anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary. Almost. I guess we can talk about it then.
We can.
Oh,
what are you getting
sweet.
me? Wait, it has to be a surprise.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Phew. I'm getting you a pop quiz. We will also have another query or blurb critique. So if you want your query featured on the podcast, you can find the details about how to do that on our website or Twitter page.
You can find our podcast on our website, storychatradio.com, or you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or many other streaming services. While you're there, please leave us a rating. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at StoryChatRadio.
Thanks for joining in our nonsense.